And third, utilities and other service providers are putting in place measures to provide services to those people who are not connected to the network through different types of approaches. Next, please. Some of the responses I mentioned before. The case of Ghana Water Company is a very emblematic case in Africa. In Colombia, in Latin America, the government ordered the utilities across the country to reconnect about 200,000 suspended connections that would benefit about 1 million people. But this obviously has a significant impact on the revenues of the utilities because they have to provide additional services. This is 1 million people, but also because the tariff increases that had been approved previously have been frozen, and there are deferrals for payments on unpaid bills and other measures that are affecting the revenues of the utility. And in this case, the compensation that the government is putting in place for the utilities affected by these measures is basically to postpone obligations in terms of investments that had been agreed upon before between the utilities and the government. So they are compensating the utilities and they are telling them, okay, your revenues are affected by these measures, so you have the right to postpone your investment obligations. Next, please. So also, some service providers in different countries are putting in place emergency measures. And we have here a few examples. I'm sure you're very familiar, but the most popular one, I would say, is that service providers and government authorities and local governments are commissioning different types of suppliers of water through water tankers to provide water in community points and in storage tanks and in different areas or institutions in peri-urban neighborhoods of main cities around the world. So water tankers is a very common measure. In some cases, the water quality is questionable, but this is happening all over the world. And there are other measures in many places in Africa, for instance, to provide water in specific water points where people have to go and collect the water, but this not always is recommended because of the issue of social distancing. But this is what's happening today all over the world. Next, please. So we know and we see every day in the media, in the newspapers, in the headlines, the importance of water. The importance of water. We need to wash their hands, but the reality is that water is not always available. Next, please. And I would like to share a few examples of what we consider good practices given the context. And this is the case of Burkina Faso, where the government has signed a contract plan. Those of you who are familiar with the French system of having contracts between the government and state-owned enterprises may know how this works. It's basically similar to a concession contract between a government and a private company, but in this case it's between two government entities that sets obligations for the service provider and also rights to have certain level of revenues. And this has been done between the government of Burkina Faso and ONEA. But also what is important here in the context of COVID is that this state-owned operator, ONEA, can provide water, bulk water supply to private sector operators. These are small local companies that receive the right to deliver services in informal settlements around the cities where the main utility cannot go. So the government taps through the state utility the local private sector to provide water in certain points in peri-urban areas of the country. And this is a very interesting model to ensure water supplies during COVID. Next, please. Another interesting example in Africa is the case of the Uganda National Water and Sanitation Company that over the years has had a sustained improvement in all KPIs related to financial and operational performance, including cost recovery. So in this case, the company is very well prepared, given the strength of its finances and operations, to address challenges associated to COVID. One of them, of course, is the reduction in revenues, and second, to be able to provide services in peri-urban areas of the main cities, because they have the resources to do that. So next one, please. There are other examples of countries that have undertaken important sector reforms, including for the turnaround of their utilities, that puts them in a very strong position to address the challenges of COVID. For instance, in the case of Brazil, the utility of the state of São Paulo is one of the, I would say, the strongest utilities, not only in Latin America, but globally as well. This utility serves around 30 million people, and of course it has been affected by COVID, but the reality is that they are providing and putting in place very quick solutions to provide water to people that lives in the poor peri-urban areas of the city of São Paulo and the state of São Paulo. I can discuss that later on during the discussion, but this is a very good example of how a strong utility is responding to COVID. And the same in other countries. I just want to mention the concessions in Manila, in the Philippines, with two private concessionaires that have recently increased water access to more than 2 million people, and other important cases. All of these are supported by the World Bank, and we can provide more information later on. Next, please. I think I'm running out of time, Raymond, but so I will conclude very quickly. If you go to the next, please. So to conclude, I wanted to mention different tools that the Water Global Practice of the World Bank is putting in place to support utilities and governments, not only to address the impacts of COVID-19, but also to continue supporting the transformation and the turnaround of the utilities. One initiative is what we call the Utilities of the Future. The Utilities of the Future intends to support the performance improvement of the utilities, but also to build resilience, to improve the governance, and put the utilities in a pathway to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. But of course, today, the Utilities of the Future is also addressing the immediate effects of COVID. Policy, institutions, and regulation is another activity that the bank has deployed to support different countries to strengthen the institutions, including the regulatory agencies. Then we have a program to support utilities through what we call a rapid assessment tool, that is a financial model to understand the financial implications of COVID on the utilities. And finally, we are working on the policy implications and criteria for different financial policy and financial instruments that governments are putting in place to support utilities. Some of them are called liquidity facilities, and we have a set of recommendations around the design of these liquidity facilities. So let me stop here, and I will be happy to respond to any questions and participate in the discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gustavo, for this very, very interesting and rich presentation. I'm sure a lot of questions arise. I see the first questions are already coming in through the chat function. How we would like to proceed is having the input from all three panelists first, and then afterwards going to the Q&A session. So with this, I would suggest we proceed to our next speaker, who is Mr. Walter Kling from Vienna Waterworks. And I see Walter was able to connect in the meantime. So I would suggest we move on with Walter's intervention, and I would like to ask Andrea to unlock Walter, that we can hear him also and that he can provide his statement and his intervention. Walter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Raymond, and hello to everyone. I think you hear me loud and clearly and see me. Regards from Vienna. Well, my role in this session here is to give you a little bit of insights from the practical view as a managing director of Vienna Water, of how we managed to go through this COVID crisis. I'd like to start with one main point, which is quite important for us to be stressed, and this is we did have over the last 12 years the implementation of a very detailed crisis management scheme, which we introduced at Vienna Water, and we had several trainings, several opportunities to train very different scenarios. All of them always connected to the product of water, whether there was a water quality issue which we need to deal with. But this will all happen theoretically, and when we had our discussion, do you have an idea what can happen, what could be a crisis of a nuclear power plant that goes wrong, like Chernobyl, and our water resources are affected? And at the end of the discussion, we said, well, and probably a pandemic could also approach, but this seemed to be for us a very strange idea. We are now facing this situation. So what was our reaction? I was quite not surprised, but quite satisfied that our whole staff was able within a few days to implement a fully crisis management scheme to move people back to home office, but to actively connect them and to have a full working place out of their homes. So a number of our staff, which is usually working in administration jobs, was able to connect from their home office. So we cleared our main building here in Vienna, and we had all this staff allocated to their home office. Certainly, we did have staff which needed to be physically present. That's especially in these technical stations like pumping stations, and mainly in our steering units, in our main control center, where we had, and this was very well prepared, people were already trained for that. We divided in parallel teams. We secured that hygienic issues are settled in a way that the disinfection for people was properly done. And we only had to close down the building sites in the city. So the only effective work which we really closed down was any kind of building site. So all our contractors working for Vienna Water were asked to close the building sites, and this happened for 6 weeks. We were very happy, let's say this way, from a managing director, that we were not in the front row of this crisis. Because the water, our product, was not affected. So the public awareness was there is no danger coming from the water. This was very, very rarely asked or communicated. The main issue on this COVID-19 crisis was a public health issue to secure people, and this therefore the water services were not in the front row, either from media responses or from other questions. The main focus was really going whether the health security is properly managed here in Austria or in Vienna. So this is why we were really focusing on getting our staff protected. The main thing, and I think the main message which we took away is we were asked by the authorities of the city of Vienna, please check and please secure that the water services are running without problems, and please leave us with the situation that this is a service we can trust on, and we don't need to include this in our crisis management measures. And till today, this is the case. My last point for my first intervention is, what are we doing currently? Currently, we are, let's say, back in office. We prepared this for the last 2 weeks. All our building sites are fully in function. We are even starting new building sites. So with the contractors, we were able, under new rules of hygienic cares for the employees working on the building sites, we were able to restart the building sites for water network rehabilitation, and any other works are from starting this week fully continued in Vienna Water. We have one security issue where we're very careful. We don't allow any person to come into our building. We are securing our staff very much, and we are preparing for the circumstances of this second rise of infected numbers, and to be very well prepared, whether the authorities or the government is giving us new restrictions, that we will be able to continue the water supply services, and we can react on any advices which is given from authorities, health authorities, or the government to do a local shutdown again. We will be able to manage to run our services. This is in brief, my short intervention here from Vienna, and we continue having a nice day and running good services for the people here in Vienna. Raymond, back to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Walter, for your intervention and for informing about your approaches at Vienna Waterworks for dealing with the crisis. I understand you got prepared already before, what is, I can imagine, very useful for really dealing now with these practical circumstances and really dealing with the crisis. I see that additional questions are coming in. Walter, the same like with Gustavo, will come back to you with questions following the intervention from our third panelist, who is Elisabetta Bocci from the Albania Water Utility Association. And Elisabetta will inform us about the activities National Utility Association can undertake in order to support their members, the utilities, in this case in Albania, and in addressing the crisis and really helping utilities to getting through the crisis and dealing with this challenge. With this, I would like to hand over to Elisabetta. Elisabetta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Raymond. Thank you for the introduction, and greetings to the panelists and everybody who has joined us today in this webinar. As you mentioned, yes, I represent here a water association. Our core members are the water utilities, but we also have other categories of membership, such as private sector members, academia, as well as institutions and individuals. As most of us, the work during the last 2 months, and even currently actually, has shifted from our annual work plan and has shifted totally to addressing COVID-19 pandemic. More specifically, we have been working on 3 major activities. Initially, we have intensified and focused our communication with our member utilities, but also the larger water stakeholder community in Albania. In one direction of our communication, especially to water utilities, has been the collection of information, relevant information and reliable information around COVID-19 as it relates to health, but also as it relates to its connection to water and wastewater. What you're seeing on the screen is a dedicated web page that we created on our website called COVID and Water. This is the English version of that page, but we have, of course, our audience, our major audience is Albanian speakers, so this information that is put in here is also in Albanian. The web page has information from government, normative acts, laws related to the pandemic, and also emergency situations. Also guidelines by our national public health institutions. A very important document that we decided to translate immediately after it was released was a technical brief issued by World Health Organization on water sanitation, hygiene, and waste management for the COVID-19 virus, which in fact provided many answers to questions that water professionals were already having about, how about the transmission, how does the transmission of the virus work when it comes to water and wastewater. And this has been also a very good reference document for our water utilities to be used to shape their messages in communicating with their customer base, so that they ensure citizens that water is safe, and actually it's our best friend these days. There are other informations on the webpage from other sources, IWA, IAWD, other professional organizations. The other way or direction of that communication with our utilities has been to receive their feedback actually on how they are dealing with addressing and responding to the situation. And it was quite impressive actually to receive these very positive news from our water utilities. As a first step, everybody had ensured that they had taken all the necessary measures to protect the health of their customers and as well as their staff, while on top of this, making sure that they maintain the same level of service for the continuity of water supply and sewage and wastewater services. A collection of this feedback was then put together by us in an article shared with in our monthly newsletter Burimi in April, and it's a good reference point actually for, it's encouraging to read this good reaction by the utilities, and also it's a good source to share practices with other utilities who read the article. As a second step, we undertook a survey among our water utilities to measure the initial impact of COVID-19, as well as to see the actions that the utilities have taken to manage the risk and their plan for contingencies. The survey results have been published, and I will refer to, I would like to share some of those with you in the next intervention, I suppose. And we are planning to share them besides a small group of stakeholders. We will make them public also through our ways of communication, our Burimi newsletter, which is about to be issued tomorrow, I believe. As the third activity, of course, we had to, and we are still in process of changing our plan of activities. Most of our activities involve meetings, physical meetings with our water utilities, our stakeholders, as we're talking about trainings, capacity development activities, peer exchange events, workshops, and we haven't practiced this virtual communication and sharing before as we need to do now. So we are actually shifting or adapting our programs for those trainings and capacity development programs that can be delivered virtually. Some of them will continue to be delivered, even though virtually now. And in the same time, we are also planning to organize other trainings and webinars that are relevant to the situation. One of them being water safety plans, and also another one which could be related to this on ensuring business continuity for water utilities. So that's what we have been doing so far. If you would like me to go ahead now with sharing some results of the survey, or I could do that at the second moment.
Yes, maybe Elisabeth, if you go ahead, because I think the results of the survey would be very interesting for the audience. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Andrea, if you can help me to, okay, thank you. So overall, we see it's obvious that there is an impact on the water utilities, both in terms of operations as well as in terms of budget, revenues, and expenses. On the other side, as I mentioned, but it was also obvious from the survey, but also from the direct communications we've had with water utilities, it's very positive to see actually the actions that the utilities have taken to address the pandemic. I'm going to pick some of these, probably those that tell a more impactful story, some of these results. In terms of continuity of service, regarding the impact on due to the social distancing that we all have to apply now, and the overall impact on field operations, the major part of utilities responded that they were impacted in this regard, and they were expecting to experience these challenges in the next month. The disruption in supply chain of treatment chemicals, other materials, personal protective equipment is low at the moment. However, most of the utilities expected this to become a challenge in the next month. Something that it was mentioned also by Gustavo, and we know the revenue generation and cash flow is estimated both as a present and also as an anticipated challenge in the next month for virtually all of the respondents. Sharing some of the actions that the utilities have taken to manage the risk and the emergency plans. Well, virtually all or most of the utilities plan to continue essential operations for fields and plant employees and others. It was interesting to see that most of the utilities responded that they had a business continuity plan. However, this is a topic that we would like to investigate further in communication with our water utilities, as we had some contradicting responses on this. Some utilities were requesting to have a business continuity plan, and this is something that we would like to contribute with our training resources. Most of the utilities have applied travel restrictions, work from home policies in order to protect their staff or non-essential staff, at least. Shift change policies have been revised to incorporate social distancing, and there has been a reduction in anticipated maintenance and repair schedule. If we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. In terms of communication with their customers, most of the utilities have been doing a good job in communicating, the safety of drinking water to their customers. And half of the respondents said that they have suspended late payment fees for their customers. On the other side, on the comments section shared by some of the utilities, well, we know that this is something that in turn actually is affecting negatively the utilities, as the customers do not feel the urgency to pay now. They might pay whenever they feel more safe to go out their bills. Policies that water utilities are taking or considering to continue essential operations for field, plant employees, and others. It was interesting to see how all of the respondents said that they were considering and actually had plans to train workers so that they could assist the supervisor or manager if this person in charge had to be away from his or her job. In addition, utilities are identifying staff who have applicable experience from previous jobs to be called upon request to substitute people who might need to leave because they get ill. And utilities had some form or were planning to provide some form of support to the employees in terms of family support during this time. Moving certain employees out of rotation from the workplace and reserve team shifts, again, most of the utilities were considering to do this. Coming to the budgetary revenue spending reductions, again, almost all of the utilities were faced with budgetary revenue or spending reductions, either current or anticipated. Estimations for some of the utilities in terms of the impact on revenues range up to 70%, which is quite a high number in the next 3 months, and for the end of the year, up to 60%. Other challenges that were shared by the water utilities were related, of course, to bill collections, which is reflected on the decrease in revenues during this time, anticipated high chlorination costs, and also water reservoir safety, which in Albania, by regulation, it has to be done physically by people who have to go and ensure safety of these water reservoirs. This is, in a summary, the findings of our survey. We realized that there are many questions. The survey actually opens many questions for discussion, and we plan to follow up on those questions with the utilities, but also the larger water sector stakeholders.
Thank you very much, Elisabeth, for providing your insights in the work you are doing as a National Utility Association in Albania. I can imagine really the work you did, like collecting information directly from the utilities via questionnaires and really having this information on the table is extremely useful to get a comprehensive picture, a better picture of what the challenges are, and also to react accordingly and support also the utilities in order to take action and reach out to other stakeholders. And thank you also for sharing these insights with the broader audience here today. Thanks a lot. So with this first round of interventions, we would like to enter the next stage of today's webinar. We would like to enter the Q&A session, and I've seen that the number of participants, we have currently more than 114, have posted a number of questions, and I would suggest I would start again first with Gustavo, posing a question to him. Gustavo, you provided information on the experience dealing with COVID-19 from a global perspective. You provided information on experience in Asia, in Africa, in America. The question I would like to pose to you is, how far do you think are there common dominators in these different regions? So do utilities have similar challenges around over the globe, or are there specific lessons learned which are relevant specifically for our region here in Europe, for the Danube region? And which specific support is provided by the World Bank? For instance, is there a specific program via which COVID-19 response is taking place, and by which you can support utilities in order dealing with the crisis? Gustavo, I think you're still muted. 1 second. Andrea, can you please unlock Gustavo to hear him? Well, maybe Gustavo, we can come back to you once we hear you.
Hear me now?
Now it works, yes. Perfect.
Okay,
now
great.
It works.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Raymond. So I was saying that indeed the challenges we are seeing that utilities are facing around the world in a way are similar. Perhaps the magnitude is different, but reduction in revenues or collections, because people cannot, just Elisabetta was mentioning in the case of Albania, people don't go to the office of the utility to pay in cases there are no electronic means of payment for the invoices of the utilities. But there is a reduction both in revenues and collection rates. This one can say that is kind of universal. You see it in the US, in Europe, and in different continents. The challenges with the supply chains, yes, and perhaps in some countries expected to increase. So this is a common challenge. Another challenge that may be not so prominent in the case of the Danube region is the need to increase the supply of water to peri-urban areas, because the coverage or the access, barring for a few countries in the Danube, in general is very high. Utilities are covering, at least in the urban areas, are covering most of the population. So you don't have the issue of the need to ensure water supplies for everybody. Perhaps, a continuity of service in some cases is less than 24 hours, but the issue is more prominent, I would say, in South Asia and in Africa. That may be a bit different. But the issue of revenues and, this, what I included in my slide, which is to do more with less, I would say that is a common challenge. In terms of the support of the water global practice, I showed in one of my slides, and this is available to every country through the bank teams, are the different tools that I presented. One is the support to utilities through the initiative that we call the Utilities of the Future. And Raymond, as we discussed, there are many synergies with the programs that have been put in place by the Danube Water Program and the IAWD. So there are important synergies. The Utility of the Future now will include what we call a module on COVID that will support utilities prepare emergency response and recovery plans. That is not only to respond to the immediate emergency, to put in place emergency response plans for those who don't have it, but also how you prepare utilities to recover from the first phase of the pandemic. Let's say when the lockdown is over, because the effects of the pandemic will unfortunately continue for a few months. Hopefully not for years, but that may happen as well. So what happens when the lockdown is over? So that's the recovery. But also, with the World Bank believes that it's very important to continue supporting utilities to build sustainability. Because again, as I said in my short presentation, the utilities that have built that sustainability, that have strong revenue streams, that can cover their operating costs and can contribute to their expansion programs, are much better prepared to address the effects of COVID than the others. So we have TA programs, technical assistance, and through our operations, as we are discussing currently with the government of Albania, to provide an example, through our loans, provide support to the national governments with financial resources from the World Bank, so that those resources flow to utilities across the country. I don't know if I missed anything from your question, Raymond.
I think, Gustavo, the feedback was very rich. I'm sure we would have a number of follow-up questions. We will try to come back to one or the other of them following when we followed up with the exchange with Walter and Elisabetta, I would suggest, because there are specific issues also which you raised, which we may be able to address a little bit also in the follow-up question. But thanks a lot for this feedback. I think you covered it very broadly. I'd like to move on now to Walter again, and also picking up one point which Gustavo mentioned, namely that utilities which are strong and more resilient, also better prepared for dealing with the situation. Walter, you managed that there was a certain amount of preparation at Vienna Waterworks, even though not expecting really that a pandemic like the one we are currently facing would actually occur, but currently we are in the situation. And I'd like to ask you whether there are specific measures which will be put permanently in place by Vienna Waterworks after the crisis is hopefully over at a certain stage. So do you strengthen your preparedness for resilience in terms of pandemics also in the future? Is this a lesson learned, or which specific measures are you planning to take as a follow-up now with this experience?
I think, as I said before, water services are not in the front row. It's still a health crisis. So what we have in our feedback sessions in the crisis management is we learn that our crisis management is very well organized, and our capability to react on the advices or the requests from the health authority is actually very good. So whenever there was a request how we should react, how we should protect our staff, or how we should put hygienic measures and procedures in place, we were with our teams. We were in the communication. We were very quickly in getting this organized and to be the first ones who secure that this new circumstances are put in place. It's a basic of a crisis management to be prepared, to think about scenarios that could happen, to prepare your organization to react, but you're never aware what will be the real impact, what will happen. Will it be a flood? Will it be a blow up of a nuclear power plant, as I said before, or an earthquake? So many things can happen. You just are focused to continue thinking, am I prepared for this impact again? And to answer your question, yes, we are considering whether we can perform even better in protecting our staff, and in this case also protecting our services to be in place. I just wanted, so this is, and there are no specific measures. The measures are really the ones from the health authorities and the requests they give us to say, look, this is what you should provide. They are learning themselves to deal with the crisis. So it's a really quick exchange and a request for quick reactions. I just wanted to reply to the others very briefly to give our figures. In Vienna, we have a drop of 6% of the water consumption in Vienna. So we are not facing a significant, let's say, a reduction of the water consumption. And this is even compensated by a very dry spring. So the climate change issue with the drought which we face in spring is compensating, and we are absolutely close to the water consumption which we had last year. So in this case, by the water consumption and in also with the related income, we don't have any impact for our company in this respect. So this is not an issue for us. And our collection and billing system is fully in place and is working. This is our main focus, to get the money collected. So there is no impact on that, and this is working very properly. And nobody is requesting anything about water fees in Vienna.
Thank you very much, Walter, for these insights. I would like to pick up the last point you made and move forward from Austria to Albania, to Elisabetta, because you mentioned that the collection of bills is not an issue for Vienna Waterworks. Elisabetta, you mentioned that, if I understood correctly, there are significant financial impacts for utilities in Albania. You mentioned also like that the Albania Water Association, that your National Utility Association, is collecting information and reaching out to stakeholders in order to have the relevant discussions and also provide support to your utilities. In terms of the financial impact, maybe would it be possible that you elaborate a little bit further what you are planning from your side in order to support utilities dealing with this significant reduction in income, in revenues, and how you are planning to support utilities to overcome these issues? So are you planning any exchange with specific stakeholders, with the government, or would be interesting to have some further insights on your plans in this direction? Thank you.
Yes, Raymond. Gustavo mentioned actually the financial modeling tool for water utilities developed by the World Bank, and Albania is in the group of countries that where this model is planned to be implemented starting soon. what we have measured with our survey is actually a perception. We did not collect real numbers from the utilities in terms of, in figures, in euros, how much money they have lost during this time because of the reduced collection rate. So what's needed at this moment is actually a better picture, a more clear picture of where those numbers are and how those numbers are being predicted to affect the utility in the future. So I believe the financial model of the bank would help quantify that financial impact. And in support of that, and to be able to advocate actually for the needs of the sector, we're planning, as I mentioned initially, a webinar with water utilities to get some more feedback that the survey could not provide us, and to put together this feedback in the table of discussion with the institutional stakeholders, government stakeholders of the sector, as well as the donors and IFIs, and to discuss there the opportunities for support from this group of people. If you would allow me, I would like to, because it caught my eye actually, a question on the chat, and I intended to address this, but I would say it's a provocative question because it speaks about adaptation of water tariffs to ensure affordability during the COVID-19 pandemic. And whenever we talk about adapting of water tariffs, as if meaning reduction of water tariffs, I get uncomfortable because we don't talk ever about reducing energy tariffs or I don't know, telecommunication tariffs or internet tariffs. But we talk about, our water tariff as if this is the tariff that is the heaviest in the pocket of the customer. I think this is an opportunity for the water sector to advocate, especially in countries like Albania, where many utilities face collection. Not high enough collection rates. Even before the pandemic, this is a time to advocate towards our customers that this is not a commodity. This is not something that we do for fun. Water utilities do not provide something that, it's optional. No, water utilities are here to protect public health and environment. And this is a message that we don't say enough, or we don't say ever, probably. We talk about efficiencies of our water utilities, but I think we should bring this message to our customers that this is how important your water utility is, and this is how important your bill is, to make sure that the water utility remains financially sustainable and in turn can protect your public health. So this is one message, one direction of this message. And on the other side, it's our job as water professionals to advocate also with the stakeholders, governments, that water remains high in the agenda of the government and in the agenda of policymakers, and we can make sure that everything that the sector needs now, and it needs to be more sustainable, is addressed as it should be by the policymakers, not just now, but also in the future.
Raimo?
Thank you very much, Elisabetta. Gustavo, I come to you in a second. Thank you, Elisabetta. So there are also positive messages, and every crisis bears also opportunities. It seems like this is the case also in Albania. And also thank you for pointing out the important role you're playing as an intermediator, basically, between utilities, the government, donors, and IFIs, in order to gain support also for dealing with the situation, with the crisis. Thank you for that. Gustavo, you wanted to react straight away. I don't want to restrict you, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Raymond. No, just wanted to echo Elisabetta because, it's a very clear and powerful message. This situation shouldn't undermine the viability of the utilities. and the capacity of the utility to continue providing services. It's very important to highlight that if decisions are made regarding tariffs, payments, shutoffs, compensation ideally to the utilities should come from somewhere else. I mean, ideally from that entity who took the decision that impacts the revenues of the utilities. We also understand that that may not always be possible because government's budgets will be under pressure from different sectors, but then everybody needs to be mindful that decisions regarding the tariffs and collection of revenues that undermine the capacity of the utilities to sustain their operations will have consequences in terms of the level of service providers. Regarding the previous discussion, in terms of the financial impacts of this crisis, obviously it will all depend on how long the utilities will need to operate under the COVID conditions. If restrictions are lifted in 1, 2, 3 months, that's one thing, and utilities may be able to recover relatively soon. But if it takes longer, obviously the financial impact will be longer. As I said before, in the United States, given also the unemployment situation and the difficulties of many families, to afford their own expenditures and to survive, here in the U.S., it has been estimated that the impact in revenues will be in the range of 16 to 20%. That is huge, and more so in other countries. I'm very happy to hear, Walter, that you are not seeing, in the case of Vienna, such a significant impacts in the revenues of Vienna Water Works. I don't know if that's due to the impact of COVID in Austria may not be exactly the same as we are seeing here in the United States, but it's it's very good news to hear that you are not so affected in the case of Vienna. Over to you, Raymond.
Thank you, Gustavo, for this immediate reaction on this. I see that Walter also wants to react directly. Walter, the floor is yours.
Well, I just had a quick look through the chat, and I saw there a question regarding the water fees and whether this process to help people with suspending the payments, if this might be helpful or lead to legal problems. My recommendation and my view from the administration of the city of Vienna is quite clear. If the government or the city government wants to help, it's good for the public to make separate funds available and to provide a quick payment or a quick access to money that helps people to cover costs or to cover their needs. It's very complicated to go into our billing system and to say we are helping people by suspending payments which are electronically processed over the years. You can, as a government, you can help people where there are tools that are already provided. This is especially happening in Austria with the tax payment. So you can very easily ask for a postponement of your tax bill for the next 2 or 3 months, but you need to pay this a little bit later. But we don't have such tools for the water fee payment process in Vienna. So coming to the point whether it's practical to suspend water bills, this is not the best tool. It's rather complicated to overcome such a crisis. It's much better for the government to give a direct help with financial help to those people who need it, and then they can decide on which of their payments they need to cover with this bill, with this payment, which bill they would tick off the list. This was just a quick reply on the chat which I saw. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Walt, and thank you for monitoring also the chat and reacting directly on this. Going through the questions also which were posed by participants, I see that we have received already 2 questions on the issue of wastewater. So maybe we want to step a little bit out from the financial and institutional questions and the water supply questions and discussing briefly one question with regard to wastewater. So one question which was posed is, how feasible is it to establish an early warning system for tracking COVID-19 in the sewer systems, and whether there are specific protection needs for staff dealing with sewage and wastewater? Maybe we can pose this question to all three panelists, and whoever wants to pick it up can react straight away.
Raymond, may I come in?
Sure, Gustavo, go ahead, please.
So I tried to respond on the chat on that question, and what we see is that more and more countries are tracing COVID in sewage, and it has been found not only in the 12 cities of the initial research in the Netherlands, but also in the USA, in different places, in Canada, Australia, and it seems to be a common thread. So that's a clear possibility and recommended by different authorities as a simple way of tracking the presence of COVID-19 in a community. This is very straightforward. On the protection for workers, I will let those of you who are more involved in direct operations to comment on that. But of course, the use of the traditional protective equipment is something that should be recommended. Back to you, Raymond.
Thank you, Gustavo. I see Walter also wants to react.
Very quickly, what I know from Vienna, I don't know it in total detail, but the detection of COVID-19 remains in the sewer. So this is not the virus who is in but it's remaining product which can give you the conclusion that there was a COVID-19 load in the sewer system. This is a research done, especially the researchers want to have a tool to see or to identify the undetected numbers of people who are infected. So it could be the idea is to have a tool to give you the opportunity to the health authorities to say, we see in the sewer that there is a much higher number of people which seem to be infected compared to the numbers which are counted or already identified by tests. The result at the moment in Vienna is that this remains of COVID are recognized, but there is no exact conclusion how this relates to any number of people, and research is ongoing, and it's just an observation of researchers, but it doesn't conclude to significant results which can help health authorities to make conclusions on the current situation of the crisis in the city. So this is my knowledge about this.
Thank you very much, Walter, also for your feedback on this. I'm looking at the watch. We are actually running a little bit out of time because officially the time is over already for today's exchange and for the webinar. Going quickly through the chat, I see that EURO, so the European Umbrella Organization, is echoing also Elisabeth's statement on the importance of communicating the importance of water services under the current crisis, and that EURO is currently setting up a working group on the value of water services to explain exactly this. So I think, as we mentioned, there's also maybe some opportunities under this crisis situation in order to put the whole water agenda on the table and increase awareness of the importance of these services. Before moving ahead, I would like to briefly come back to the panelists, whether there are any final statements which we would like to briefly make, any specific points which you would also like to reflect upon in 2 sentences maybe.
Raymond?
Yes. Yeah.
So basically what I would like to highlight from the water global practice of the World Bank is that, as I said in the beginning, COVID entails many challenges and risks, but it's also an important opportunity to reinvigorate the role of the water utilities and the water sector in prevention of future pandemics like this and other disasters. The other point I wanted to make is that Many countries have made important gains over the last 10 or 20 years in terms of sector reforms and utility turnaround. And we see that those countries that have made those gains and transformation of the sectors are in a much better position to address the impacts of COVID. So this is a fantastic opportunity to strengthen everywhere the importance of having strong utilities, strong service providers, and strong governance in place, governance systems in place to be able to address future pandemics. Thank you, Raymond. Thank you, everybody, for this webinar, and looking forward to continue working with all of you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Gustavo, and thanks really for joining us also today. It was extremely helpful, providing your input, also global expertise and global input. Walter, Elisabetta, do you have a final statement also, which you would like to make before we go into the closing of the webinar?
You were asking about this closing thoughts. I think what we learned as a utility is much more on the internal staff side. So we are quite confident that we have built up a very good crisis system, which we were able to put in place immediately, and we are quite satisfied about our performance. We are happy that by the public awareness, people are definitely not scared that water is affected, so they feel quite secure that this is not an issue, and the focus on health is much more to protect, to keep hygienic rules, and it's a very big internal learning lesson which we had managing this crisis. Also, thanks to everyone who participated and listened to us. Hopefully, the feedback or the contributions from Vienna was an interesting point of view for those who listened to us. Thank you from Vienna. Back to you, Raymond.
Thank you very much, Walter. I'm sure input provided from your side was extremely insightful and helpful also and interesting. Elisabetta, maybe as third panelist, some final words from your side also.
Yes, thank you, Raymond. As a water association, we are committed to our members to continue to provide relevant, useful information around this crisis, as well as to provide resources that help them to face the challenges that are obvious, and we shared also as part of my presentation as a result of the crisis. I believe that this is an opportunity for many good things, but as an opportunity that we come together and we come out of this stronger together as a sector. And I would also like to express my gratitude lastly to all the men and women who work in an already challenging sector, but it's been even more challenging these last 2 months. And they have continued to provide an excellent service to all of us under very uncommon conditions. So, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Elisabeth. I think these are excellent messages you're providing as the third panelist. I think with this, we come to a stage where, unfortunately, we reach a time where we have to do a brief wrap-up and closing of the event. First, I would like to thank our three panelists, Gustavo, Walter, and Elisabetta, for their participation and for sharing their experiences and their rich insights in how to deal with the crisis on the different scales and different levels and in different functions also. I think the presentations and discussions were very rich in terms of getting a first overview on the overall situation at global, regional, and local level and challenges the water services sector is confronted with. These are reaching from very practical questions on how to ensure service delivery under the current restrictions over short, mid, long-term implications in terms of the financial viability of water utilities, up to the lessons learned also to improve resilience for potential future similar events. Every crisis is first and foremost a crisis, but secondly, a crisis may also be opportunities, as we heard today, to improve the visibility of the importance of the sector and to work closer together to overcome the current challenges and difficult circumstances. The specific situation might differ between countries and utilities, but we hope that the launch of this series is useful for your daily work, not only in terms of concrete actions which can be taken, but also as a further step in building a stronger water community in the region, benefiting from the exchange of each other's experiences and lessons learned. Furthermore, I would like to thank the audience for joining us today, and also, as Elisabetta mentioned, for their commitment back at home in different functions for ensuring the continuation of these essential services. We hope that you benefited from your time investment today and found the exchange interesting and also useful. And third, I would like to thank the IAWD and the World Bank team, so my colleagues, for their work in the preparation of this series of events. As mentioned, this is the beginning of the series of webinars, so this was just the first one, and we hope that we can also welcome plenty of you in the planned follow-up events, to which I would like to briefly draw your attention to. We will have our next webinar in 1 week from today, on the 14th of May, same time. Unfortunately, it seems like same place still, because restrictions will not go away so quickly. And there we want to dive deeper into the experiences of individual utilities in the Danube region. As panelists, we will have representatives from utilities of different countries who will inform more closely about their experiences and lessons learned. And then the third webinar currently is scheduled for the 28th of May, again, same time. Which will allow to dig deeper into the lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic for ensuring business continuity of water services. I hope you can join us also for these next events. More specific information and registration details will be provided in due time. So please stay posted and look out for these events. And finally, be informed again that the recording presentations and a brief summary of the event will be provided as a follow-up to this event. But also, if you have specific questions, don't hesitate to reach out directly to us. If you require more detailed information, we will see what we can do in order to provide you this more detailed information, and getting in touch also with speakers and colleagues in the follow-up. With these final words, I would like to close the first webinar. Stay safe, stay sane. And we hope that we can welcome you again in good health next week, Thursday, for the second webinar in the series of webinars. Thank you very much, and wishing you all the best, and hope to see you soon again. With these words, I would like to close today's webinar. Thank you.